Hi, welcome. This is the CaddyInfo.com Cadillac Conversations. We do these on Thursday nights when you can catch us here, many Thursday nights. I have with me tonight Cadillac Jim from the forums.
Good evening.
We may see some of the other guys come by. If you want to be part of our conversation one evening, what you do is circle me on Google Plus and send me a note and let me know that that's what you want to do. If you have my text, then send me a text. And Tim Carroll, we're looking for you out there because you got your new product line coming up, and we would like to hear some more about it. So, and I apologize, Jim, I interrupted you while we were busy talking about traction control.
Yeah, well, we were saying about that video you uploaded today of the road test of a BMW M4 Coupe, and it was very enthusiastic, but there were a lot of problems with it. You focused on the transmission, but it looked like there was a lot of lack of refinement in the stability control and the handling, and so he talked about numb handling and as being good and this kind of thing. And it did not look as well controlled in terms of not plowing when you put the power on trying to come out of a turn and so forth. So it was good. It was fast. It was worlds ahead of things we saw a few years ago, but it's no Cadillac. It's no CTS V. It's no ATS V or probably even the V Sports. For example, they said that the stability control, if you left it on automatic, it would tend to surprise you, and it was difficult for someone to get their best times because it would cut in when they didn't want it and wouldn't be there when they needed it and so forth. And so it was better to operate the stability control manually. And so I found that out. I recall reading in Car and Driver in the early 1990s when it first appeared on the Corvettes that they tried to disable it because they thought, oh, we don't need this silly stuff. That's for amateurs, and we're pros. But they found out that the fastest way around the track was with the stability control on, with multiple drivers. And so that's to me, a maturity of the stability control. If you say, well, you know, another scenario, but this is the scenario, an experienced, a competent test driver on a track, does your stability control work for you or not? And with the BMW, it does if you operate it. But with the Cadillac, you put it in competition mode and you're good to go. Now, I've seen videos of Cadillacs. I remember one sometime back, the shooting brake, the wagon version. There was some guy following one in a Corvette, and he was chasing a Porsche. And he had caught him, and he was trying to get him around him. And at one point, he coming out of a curve, he had a good hold shot on him, and he nailed it, and the damn thing just, of course, it just went sideways and stayed that way. And he waved the guy behind him around, so they gave him a two-finger salute and went on. But, you know, you do not nail a performance car coming out of a turn when you want to pass somebody. That may be because you want it to go, but there's always a trade of traction in lateral and longitudinal directions and everywhere in between, and you need to make the transition so that between the steering wheel and your foot, you need to know where that edge is to get the optimal performance. And this guy had no clue, clearly. But the stability control, when he blew it completely, simply held the car sideways until he took his foot out of it and was straightened it out. Now, I've seen that a number of times in people with these cars trying to Playboy racer or learning and so forth, and that's what it does. I've had experiences and so forth with mine that are not racetrack experiences, but I have a lot of confidence in it. I have not used it in the competition mode. You know, I haven't taken it up to a track and opened it up and been in a situation where that's appropriate. But the stability control on the Cadillacs is quite mature. It's been around for 20 years, and it was better when it came out, or first on production cars, than what I'm seeing in the competition now. BMW is the competition because they're the same performance range and price range as the ATS-V, right?
Yes. The M4 specifically, the ATS-V Coupe will be targeted at the M4. The ATS-V is coming out at 61,500, roughly speaking, and the M4 is in the same range. It starts at 65. The one car and driver tested was at 83. But
Hmm.
I think so. I think I don't think there is going to be an ATS-V premium. There is an ATS-V track kit, and there are performance enhancements that you can do with the ATS-V, but you don't have to spend another $10,000 on top of the ATS-V in order to get the ATS-V premium, if you will. Like
Yeah.
the CTS-V Sport, you do. If you want all the bells and whistles, you've got to spend another $10,000 to get the CTS V Sport Premium. So you can get the V Sport, which has the engine, the suspension, the brakes, but it doesn't have adaptive cruise. It doesn't have,
Oh, I see.
some of the electronic bells and whistles. So if you want those, you've got to spend the extra 10K. On the ATS-V, no. What I was just watching is the ATS-V is going to be 150 pounds. The M4 weight apparently varies depending on which configuration you get. But
150 pounds is pretty light for a car.
150 pounds heavier than an M4.
Oh, okay.
150 pounds heavier than an M4. So the M4's got uh, a little less horsepower, but it's going to be 150 pounds lighter.
Well, that's just one number, so that does not distinguish between the two cars.
Well,
They're
that
about
really
the same weight and
surprises
about the
me.
same horsepower. But what does the torque curve look like? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We need to look at the lap times. We need
Well,
to see
the
time
M4's
trials.
the M4 is going to make a max of 406 pound-feet of torque, and
Uh-huh.
of course the ATS-V is going to do better than that. It's at 445 pound-feet. But what we actually need to see is a dyno curve of the LF4 engine in the ATS-V versus the engine in the M4. And
Yeah.
because BMW traditionally, this is one of my essays for the Cadillac designers is you need to bring 475 horsepower in the ATS-V. They ended up doing it at 455. But I think that they needed 475 to comfortably have more horsepower than the BMW's claim of 425. This is the same thing they did with the ATS, where they said, oh, BMW's got a 240 horsepower turbo 4, so we'll come out with 270. BMW's got a 300 horsepower inline turbo 6, so we'll come out with 321, and we'll weigh the same. We'll have a little more horsepower. We'll be good. No, you cannot do that because BMW underrates their engines, and then you'll have the same problem with the ATS-V that we had with the ATS tests, where the BMW four-cylinder is slightly quicker than the ATS four-cylinder, the BMW 6 slightly quicker than the ATS 6. And
Yep.
that kills sales for that market because they just read the buff books and say, oh, same price, I'd rather have the BMW. Thanks.
Well, you can't tell me they're being fooled because GM has played that same game for 50 years.
Yeah, you'd think
So
they'd be familiar with it since they created the game,
I
right?
think BMW is chasing Cadillac or trying to, I think that they're the ones looking at Cadillac. Looking at that road test, it does very much look like they're trying to build a car that will do what the ATS-V does. And they might be using a little more brute force to win the game, but also, you know how these drivetrains are. You can reprogram the chip and tune the suspension and the engine.
Well,
And
that's a giveaway. Is that you will? I suggest that you will be able to retune the ATS-V engine for 525 to 550 horsepower.
then
They're
it will,
getting 500 horsepower out of the V Sport engine. So
yeah.
if this one does 30 more,
Uh-huh.
then you'll get 520 horsepower just by tuning it.
Yeah, well, to me, SAE horsepower means that that's sort of guaranteed on a production line, and that all of them do at least that, and most of them do a little more. How much? Who knows? I have no idea
I'm
what mine is.
still in a quandary though between I think the lighter 3,700 pound ATS-V is going to be an attractive package even against the prior year's CTS-V.
Well, I think so too. If it has comparable performance and better handling, it's certainly going to be, even if it doesn't have better straight line numbers, if they're comparable straight line numbers and appreciably better handling, yeah, that would be more attractive to me.
Yeah, um, although it's going to be pricey, there's not going to be that many of them out there, and it's going to be pricey. So there's that challenge, right? Because I prefer, well, yeah, of course, Cadillac didn't make that many of my car, and I was able to get one of it on the used market, and so it's just a matter of keep your ear to the ground, right?
Well, it can be done. You know, we've done it. You guys did it for me, and we were looking at four of them, and two
Yeah,
of them looked
exactly.
like good, and then we turned this one up.
Well, I
But
mean, the car in my driveway, they made 469 of them, and I
yeah,
still managed to find one available.
yeah,
And so, if they make a couple of thousand of the ATSVs, then they'll be
there you go.
plentiful targets
Yeah.
2 years from now.
Well, not everybody who's out to look to get a grocery getter is going to go for a $60,000 to $70,000 world class sports car. That's a select market.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a little bit of a misnomer in a way, though. That of course BMW only sells, they sell a limited number of the M3s and the
Right.
M4s, but the M3s and the M4s sell the 328s.
Exactly.
And so that's and yeah, the CT6, the CT8, da da da. Let me ask you this question. So ATSV is coming out. And let's say the new ATSV is going to be called ATSV because they
There
didn't
it
say
is.
it's going to be called CT3, did they? They said we're announcing the ATSV.
Yeah, and it comes in two trims. It comes in a base trim that doesn't have all the road stuff on it for people who don't want to drive it on the road. And I think that's very interesting. Then it comes with all the road stuff, the cruise
Oh
control,
yeah, the race,
lane
the
change.
racing accoutrement. Now
Yeah,
I would, I want the track gear just because I love gadgets. The not that I would use, not that I plan to take it racing. Let me ask you this though. So if when the ATS-V does come out,
hmm
if it was named the CT3, would you like to see the ATS sedan named CT3 and the ATS coupe named CT4?
I don't really care about the CT sequencing. And I would be more interested in the Nuremberg lap times, Nuremberg lap times.
The
Uh,
actual performance of the
yeah,
car.
bingo.
I know,
And I
but we're
don't care
talking
what
about names. Let's talk about names for a moment because that's what BMW's done. BMW said that my four doors an M3 and my two doors an M4.
hmm
So if that's working for them,
hmm
is that the way? Is that the route to happiness? That Cadillac needs to go say my four door is one car and my two door is a completely different car.
I think that it has limited significance. But I'm disappointed that Cadillac is giving up. This has been in the works for 10 years, so I can't say I'm surprised. But I like things like Fleetwood, Eldorado, Seville. I like names like that.
Now,
And if they think those are dated and they want to get fresh names, that's fine. But alphabet soup is bland.
now I mentioned in passing before we started rolling the video, the engine that's in the V Sport's a twin turbo 3.6 liter V6,
hmm
and it's rated at 430 horsepower.
hmm
The equivalent engine, and it's called an LF3. The equivalent engine in the ATS-V is called the LF4. They did so much to tune this engine for the V that they actually rolled the number. So they went
Just
from the
parts.
LF3 for the
Yeah.
V Sport, the LF4 for the ATS-V,
hmm
and it makes 455 horsepower and 445 foot-pounds of torque. So the one
hmm
in the CTS-V, 420 horsepower, 430 foot-pounds of torque. The one in the CTS-V Sport. The one in the ATS-V, 455 instead of 420 horsepower, 445 instead of 430 foot-pounds of torque. So those are interesting numbers to me for this reason. One of the things that they said, they changed the internals of the engine to toughen it up, okay?
hmm
But they raised the boost by 6 pounds.
Wow.
They went from 12 pounds of boost to 18 pounds of boost.
That also means that they use a less aggressive cam.
Yeah, there's something going on there, right? Because
Yeah.
when you add 6 pounds of boost, you would expect to get about 24% more power.
All other things being equal, yeah.
all other things being equal. And the way you figure that out, if you're watching at home, the way you figure that out is atmospheric pressure is 14.6. And so if you add 6 over 14.6, you can resolve a percentile. You're going to have some losses, but you would expect then to get 20 to 25% more power. Now, if you're expecting 25% more power on a 420 horsepower engine, you would get 525 horsepower. But it's rated at 455 horsepower. It didn't deliver 25% more power. It delivered less than 10%. So what does that suggest to you?
Well, it suggests to me that they flatten the torque curve to give it better drivability, and that'll improve its track times.
But it doesn't have more torque. It has the
I
same
wouldn't
torque.
say more torque. I would say flatter torque, for example. It comes on at a lower RPM, this kind of thing.
I think this engine is not going to be rated at 455 horsepower when it comes out.
You think it's going to be 525?
What they're actually saying is the tentative rating is 455/445. The final SAE figures are forthcoming. Now GM's history in the recent past has been, they miss it by 10 horsepower. So in other words, we were expecting the Corvette to put out 640 horsepower, and it put out 650 horsepower. But I think in this case they have missed it by a nice slice, because if you did nothing more than add another 6 pounds of boost to the turbo, then you're not going to only add 20 horsepower. You're not going to only add 5% horsepower. Half again more boost?
Well, there'll have to be a change in the spark map to deal with it, but that's a given, and that is why you don't get 30%. That's why you get 20%. It's because you have to keep from detonating and live with physics and so forth. It's hotter if it's compressed more. It'll come out of the intercooler hotter. And if the intercooler is the same size, I think the intercooler.
Oh, they have these brand new brick intercoolers built into the top of the engine. We saw the images for the way the V6 is being done, and they got the opportunity on the turbo. You got opportunity on the cooling side. Yeah. So the question would be, where would you really bring the horsepower in? So I think you can bring it in a range 455 to 525. Is there a number that's the right number for the ATS-V?
I don't know. I would have to drive one with different horsepower ranges and get a feel for what they're doing with the chassis dynamics.
And for those GM executives watching at home, Jim could actually do that for you. He has that kind of sensitivity when he's driving that he could actually tell you. Now, Texas Jim, if he were on, bless his heart, would tell you the maximum horsepower available is the minimum horsepower he would expect.
I think that one hint you might have is to look at the tire sizes, but they're not going to tell you that until it shows up on the showroom floor.
Now, we know the new CTS-V is going to put 640 horsepower, and you want a gap between it and the ATS-V. And it's going to go 200 miles an hour. The ATS-V is going to go at least 189. The M4 goes 163 because it's speed limited to 163. The ATS-V 189.
My car goes 199.
Just on the way to the store, or just?
Well, no, I'm just. But I will
say. You mean in between Texas and New Jersey?
But I will say that a CTS-V second gen like mine is one car. I forget who it was that is the only production car they ever timed at over 200. So on the other hand, that last 15 mile an hour is probably going to come a lot quicker with the new CTS-V than it would in the second gen.
So there's that much margin. The new CTS-V is going to make at least 640 horsepower. I think it quietly will make 650 horsepower because it actually has more room for breathing and more room for exhaust than the Corvette has. The Corvette's rated at 650, and I think they'll put roughly the same horsepower in the CTS-V.
Well, they're not going to have as free of flowing exhaust on the CTS as the Corvette. That's an aftermarket option, however, or possibly even a dealer option.
You're saying because it'll be more quiet, but
Cadillac.
The Corvette packaging for exhaust is usually terrible. And so, like in the C6s, they had a big problem where basically they forgot to plan for the exhaust, and so the exhaust comes back to the back, and then it goes off to the side, and then it comes back out the middle, and
Hmm.
so it's not good. The so we have the minimum. It's going to be at least 455 horsepower. We know the maximum. It'll be less than 640 horsepower. So
Unless the Corvette 675,
now
and
I
it's
think they
655.
actually, yeah, oh, well, that's true. If the CTSV comes in much higher, also, then never mind it. And the CTSV may need to because of that 704 horsepower Hellcat we keep mentioning. That if they want to make sure the new CTSV outquicks and outruns the Hellcat, then they may have to pump up the horsepower a bit. Now, but CTSV is another day. The ATSV, I think in order to assure the ATSV will outquick the M3 and the M4, it needs at least 475 horsepower. Because if BMW says the M3 has, the M4 has 420, then it actually has 450.
Yeah,
And they're going to have some advantage because they'll put a sprint transmission on the manual and they'll put the dual clutch on the automatic.
yeah,
And so you're not gonna make any ground in the transmission. The ATSV will have the new 8-speed transmission, so that's a blessing, or the 7-speed manual if you choose the 7-speed manual. These days, everybody's manual automatic transmission is quicker in the 0 to 60 in quarter mile than a manual transmission is. And
yeah. But you
especially
have
with a turbo car, you would expect it to be because the turbos stay on boost.
well, you have throttle by wire, and the computer does the shifting for you, and it's hard to beat that when you're in a hurry.
Now, if you had your choice between your car and an all-wheel drive version of your car, and I think I asked you this question sideways last week, but which one would you take? Cost is no object. If I said I'll give you either one,
Well,
your car or an all-wheel drive version.
uh, I would take the all-wheel drive for my use of it, namely legal driving on the roads and streets within there's not much to be said. There is something to be said in bad weather, but the control and the amount of power you can put in coming in the twisties and so forth is better with a four-wheel drive, and that's enough. So it's not much. There'd be some loss because of additional weight and dragging the drivetrain and so forth, but I think that uh, uh, I'm happy with 550 horsepower. I wouldn't mind losing another 10, 15 horsepower in the drivetrain if it gave me better handling in the snow. And also, when I felt like I really wanted to nail it, and I didn't have the steering wheel pointed ahead, straight ahead. I would feel like this. In other words, when I'm talking about that compromise between lateral and longitudinal traction, you have more control over the variables if you have four-wheel drive. And other
Yes.
makes have it fairly highly developed, but not in their high performance models. You see xDrive on the new BMWs, and Mercedes, I think, has some trademark applied to theirs, and they have viscous clutching between them and traction control between them and so forth. And that's all well and good, but none of them have that kind of thing available on their M series or their AMGs. In other words, if you have a rear wheel drive layout, and the engine occupying the position right behind the front suspension, but then how are you going to get the drive shaft around the oil pan? Now, an inventive person might say, well, let's just have a hole clear through the transmission, through the main shaft, right through the crankshaft and through the main bearings, and let's come out the damper wheel and have a rear end up there. Well, this has caused problems when the crankshaft goes around and the rods come through, but then that's another story. But seriously, it's a problem. And if you look at any four-wheel drive car or truck, well, then you see that when they go toward the front wheels, there's a little English and the differentials off to one side and so forth. And making that handle that kind of horsepower, like assuming you need a third of the horsepower on the front than you do on the rears, because the weight transfer lifts the weight off the front, and that's what traction will let you put into the pavement. It's still 200 horsepower, and that's probably realistically what the other models put out. So um, there you go. I really I think it's a problem for the performance cars. But Volvo C60 race models did it last year. I don't know how reliable it was, but I don't think any of them broke during the Pirelli World Class Series. Last year, I mean the year before,
Yes.
2013. So it can be done, and if it can be done, you know, like who's that? What's that old quote? If not now, when?
Yeah.
If not us, who? You know. So that's my argument. Of course, I have that argument about a lot of innovations. You know, one of my old pet rocks is a 42-volt electrical system that was being looked at by the automotive industry about 15 years ago, and they never moved forward with it because they had trouble with arcing and safety.
Oh,
And
really?
yeah, and my answer to that was go three-phase AC with an inverter by the PCM, and then this, and I had some other innovations to go with that, like a single cable used throughout the car that had your three-phase, a neutral, and three fiber optics for one bus. The three is for redundancy, so you don't have to mess with it. There's only one type of wire, and and at 400 hertz, which means that all your motors would be smaller and cheaper. And I picked 400 hertz because that's a well-known number that's been used in aircraft for 50 years. So the
Right.
technology is old for getting motors and so forth. And with the newer technology available in semiconductors, getting the DC down to things like you need for the plasma displays, the radios, and the electronics is fairly simple. The buck converter in your computer, for example, comes in at 12 volts, kind of noisy and rough. And then they have on your motherboard a 6-phase computer-controlled buck converter that puts out 1.35 volts at anywhere between 50 and 150 watts, depending on how much computer you've got, which is, you can figure it out, it's tens of amperes. And
Right.
this is all generated on everybody's computer motherboard. So a buck converter can take, say, a 60-volt DC, which you can get, if you have three-phase, you can have a 12-phase rectifier that you don't need a filter on. You put a buck converter right on that, and you can have your 12-volt at high amperage. And this gives you the overall reduction in your wire size. The arcing problem is handled because in your inverter, you sense the neutral current, and if it's out of line, you simply cut off that line. And this is equivalent to a ground fault interrupter outlet, which is shock protection. So this is also part of your safety. And since it's computer controlled, within the debugging is there for you. You either have a code reader or have a set of LEDs on the inverter if when something faults or whatever you want. But you see what I'm saying? You just look at the problems, and there's a simple solution for them all. And in volume, nothing is expensive that I've talked about. I
And
mean,
and the
your computer
goal
proves it.
of going to a 42-volt system was to allow all the high systems that are currently hydraulic or mechanical to move to electrical systems, so that you would have more voltage available.
Well, it was also to reduce the amount of copper in the system. Now, right now, you've seen the electrical diagram of the, I'm very familiar with, the 90s through the 20 years worth of North Stars through about 2010. And for example, the running lights on my 97 Eldorado, the way it worked is you pushed a switch on the dashboard. Okay, that did nothing but hit a micro switch which grounded a connection hooked to the PZM, which is behind the back seat. The PZM would then ground a connection to a relay, which was somewhere in the front of the car, which would then switch 11 volts, this kept the circuit short with a high power, to the lights and the running lights. Then a 12-volt line came back from the running lights to the dashboard and lit up a small grain of wheat bulb, so that the thing lit up, and this told you that your 12 volts was getting to the lights. And that's the way your running lights or your parking lights, your fog lights, sorry, not your parking lights, your fog lights work. And this is
Yes.
pretty typical. The wires ran all over the car 2 or 3 times for that simple system. Now, if you had something like this where everything ran on a fiber optic bus, but then every light would have its address, and the ring bus would tell it whether to turn on or turn off and how fast to do so. And it could do so simply by controlling the 12-phase rectifier triacs. And you could either work with the 60-volt DC, the 3-phase AC, or a lower voltage DC with a buck converter. You don't need the buck converter for everything. The 42-volt 3-phase would be a blessing for the HID headlights, for example. The inverters would be far simpler working from 3-phase AC than working from DC, or from 60-volt DC instead of 12-volt DC. You could keep your 12-volt battery and starter, so that technology would all be the same. And one of the problems with a 42-volt battery is instead of 6 cells, well, then you have, let's see, 42, 7, 6, oh God, I'm not even going to call out the number of cells, any one of which can give you a dead battery. This is not good. Batteries are the most vulnerable and failure-prone part of any car these days. The 12-volt battery has 6 cells. That's enough. Trust me, that's enough. So you see where I'm going with this. It solves so many problems. The problem is that people like to make incremental changes. When they went from 6 to 12-volt systems, all they really had to change was the bulbs and the transistors in the radio. And I don't think that many radios were using transistors in 55. No, matter of fact, I think very few were. Maybe Lincoln and Cadillac, but they were still using tubes. Some radios were using 12-volt tubes. And so this could have caused a bit of a problem because buck converters weren't available then. So,
right.
So it would have required changing the tubes in the radio. That would probably take a couple of days back in the engineering department. So you see where I'm going with this. And the 54-55 transition happened because copper was 15% of the weight of the car in 1954, typically.
Wow.
Cut that by a factor of 4, or theoretically could cut it by a factor of 4 by going to a 12-volt system. Now, if they go to a ring bus, which they already have with the CAN bus in nearly all cars these days, for the OBD system, if nothing else, but certainly for the ECM, PCM, and your radio theft control, and all these, everybody has its own 15-cent module built in, So having everybody on the same bus, having its address talk on the network, if you make all that part of the wiring system so that the bus is always there and everybody just repeats it or has their own address to speak and to listen, suddenly not only do most of your problems go away, it opens up new horizons. Like you have a whole lot of power to the CHMSL, so you better be careful how you ground it, or you'll end up not having uniform brightness across. Things like that tend to become much simpler if you're 3-phase, because you're in 3-phase you don't need a separate ground. You don't need a lot of current in a chassis ground.
Now, one of the criticisms of the new electric steering systems has been that they don't actually have the same touch or feel as the hydraulic steering systems. That the hydraulic system, because it's indirectly a mechanical system, actually gives you a better feel for the road than the electric systems do, even a power-assisted hydraulic.
Well, I still miss the recirculating ball. You see where that may or may not be a bad thing. Once you exploit the possibilities of an electric steering system, it's almost certainly going to be better, because you have the problem. How are you going to do the feedback? Well, they already have that in the variable steering. I had that in my 97 variable steering speed.
Isn't that just a tuning problem? I mean, there's no inherent reason why an electrically assisted steering would have to lose a mechanical feel. I mean, it's not drive-by-wire.
Well, it is.
Well, it doesn't have to be. The electrical assisted power steering.
Oh, I see.
Versus hydraulic assisted power steering.
Well, it's steer by wire until it fails, or you turn so hard you overrun it. Just like power steering is hydraulic.
Yeah, maybe
steering.
They want it to be steer by wire because they want the cars to begin to have the ability to steer themselves, right?
Well, ordinary power steering is hydraulic steering. You do not have mechanical steering unless you overrun the power steering. You turn hard enough or fast
Yeah.
enough and overrun the
So I
outrun.
think if you replace the hydraulic assist with an electric assist, if you're
Mhm.
not getting the same feel through the steering, then you're doing it wrong. It's tuned wrong.
Uh,
I don't think inherently electric power steering has to transmit less feel.
well, I have seen video games that transmit feel back to the steering wheel
Yeah.
for video racer games. If they can do it for video racer games, they can do it in your Cadillac.
Yeah, but then it could be drive by wire. I don't think electric power steering has to be drive by wire. I
No,
think
but
it could just be assisted power steering.
unless you overrun it and hit the mechanical backup system, yeah, it's drive by
Yeah.
wire, just like your hydraulic system is drive by
Mm.
hose.
Yeah, but somehow you're getting that feedback in the hydraulic system. And that's
Yeah,
what I always used to say with one of my sports cars was that you could feel every tread in the tire.
well, that's because the hydraulic system pushes. I don't really know how that works. You turn valves, and the resistance on the valves is probably what you feel. I know that on some cars that feel is almost non-existent, like the '50s Chrysler luxury models that you could spin them with a finger, and there was no feel.
Yeah, that's
And
what they
people,
wanted was
yeah,
no feel of the road, that you were
oh,
completely isolated. But
I
that's not
know.
what you want in a sports sedan.
Oh no, I'm putting my face palm here because I remember my '59 Chevrolet with its jet smooth ride, and I found out a few years into the game that they got that jet smooth ride with finite element modeling, in which the body flexing was part of the suspension compliance, and it was impossible to get that car to handle. But there was one thing: if ever when all else failed, just turn the wheel as far as you can. The car turn sideways and stop. That's not an endorsement of his handling capability. It looks to
So
me, yeah.
now, brakes to me are way overdue for replacement with an electromagnetic solution. The fact that we still stop the same way Fred Flintstone stopped his car with the friction solution for brakes. I get that it's cheap. I get that it's reliable. But why don't we use electromagnetic brakes for everything?
Well, where are you going to put the volts? In a hybrid, it's obvious, but when you don't have a
I'm
hybrid,
going to
where are
put
you
them
going to put
right. Yeah, I'm
volts?
going to put them right back into my battery. Thanks.
Uh, well, uh, there you go. You're going to go to an NMH battery, and there goes your lead acid.
But they, but I mean, is there something? Is it inherently because we're so worried that what if all the electrics of the car go out? How are you going to stop? In an electromagnetic solution, the idea would be that you apply you apply electricity to magnets, to magnetize a panel that would act as a brake pad, and it would attract the spinning disc to slow the car
Eddy
down
current,
without
eddy
actually
currents.
having a friction
Uh-huh.
interface. Right.
If you had,
Right now, every car stops. There's literally a expendable pad or two expendable pads, and they rub against the spinning disc until the car stops. That's how your car stops. You
mm,
may have power brake assists to do that, but basically every car stops on a friction surface. So, and that to me seems 115 years overdue for replacement.
well, actually, that's probably right. Disc brakes were an innovation for Indianapolis racing back before in the World War I era, and they're much older than people realize. They appeared on American cars in the late '50s and early
Yes.
'60s.
And to be fair, my Duke has disc brakes up front and drum brakes in the back. The only car I've ever owned that had drum brakes in the back. So
My '69 Chevrolet had drum brakes in the back.
yeah, and I think it's cool the way they work. I get why they didn't cool as well, but the packaging of the drum brake is interesting to me. But
Mm-hmm.
is there something else I'm
Double
missing
beating
for
too.
why are we still using friction brakes?
Well, as you pointed out, it's existing technology. It works. It's cheap. It's safe. And frankly, viscous, if the viscous brakes can work by having a magnet which is turned off for cruise, and then is turned on, and you get resistance due to eddy currents in the disc. But that will slow you down, but it won't stop you. The amount of drag is proportional to the speed and the magnetic field, and so you need a backup to bring the car to a stop. This backup can be robust enough to be a backup for a failure of the electric system. And so, and if you have, for example, the existing brake system, which would be overkill for a car like that, but if you had something like it, well, then it would last the life of the car. So why the hell not?
Yeah, the first set you could almost put dual brakes on it, right? In
Yeah.
other words, have brake pads available that are never used except in an emergency, and
Or
another
no,
set of calipers that are electromagnetic brakes.
they'd be used as you came to a stop. Anywhere below 10 or 15 miles an hour, the magnetic brakes wouldn't have enough effect to be worthwhile.
Why?
Because you have to have motion to generate those eddy currents. It's a viscous thing. The amount of brake drag is
Well,
proportional to
for
speed.
braking, I'm
Goes
sending
to
current
zero.
to the pads, right? I wouldn't have to use the motion.
Well, actually, I'm
You
thinking
switch
of
over, maybe you switch over at 15 miles an hour to sending power to the pad to
a
attract
reverse
the,
motor.
yeah.
Yeah, okay, that would work, but even so, it'd be a balancing act. You'd have to have a computer control it to bring the car to a stop and not roll it backwards.
Like every other system on the computer.
Well, yeah,
Like every other
and
system on the
the
car.
balancing act that is your spark map is a lot touchier. So yeah, but brakes are safety oriented and they have a different thing.
Now, I'm looking forward to enhanced reality windshields. Somebody mentioned this in passing. An enhanced reality windshield, for example, would the nav system, not just a heads-up display, but the windshield itself will start to add additional information. Just like this screen you and I are looking at,
Mhm.
it shows your name over your picture to me. It shows that we're live.
Mhm.
So the windshield itself would show additional information. So if someone crossed in front of your car, it would show above their head their name, perhaps their home address or their work address, you know, enhanced information, enhanced reality, as they say. As I drive along, and I'm trying to look to see, is that Green Street on the little green sign, or is it the next street? Then the windshield would highlight the street sign and right above it whatever it's actually supposed to say, 500 feet before I can physically read it on the sign.
Yeah, and the police car driving behind you would get a signal from the back of your car, and up would come on his heads-up display your VIN number, a make,
Which they're
model.
doing now.
Uh, yeah,
They actually
yeah.
have here in Plano they have a license tag scanner, and what they do is they drive around the city, and the license tag scanner looks at every license tag and does OCR, does video recognition of the license tags, looks it up in their system to see if one of them has a problem, that they have a warrant out or they have a late registration, and then flags the officer and sends them back to write a ticket or to
Yeah,
pick up the suspect or whatever the situation is.
whatever he has time to do, whatever his priorities are.
Oh, I think absolutely that yeah, the police cars will alert them that James K. Beard, miscreant, is in the next car.
Oh, the cops here love me.
Well, yeah, I am way past the time that I'm worried about the police following me
Yeah,
home. I'm
yeah.
happy to see the
I would
police
love to
because
have
they're
them
taking
follow
care
me
of
home
things.
because
Um,
once in a while I have a squirrel try to follow me home, and I have to shake him through the golf course. I want him to know where I live. You know what I mean?
I do. So, so that's the part that's what I would like to see in future cars is continued enhanced reality. I think one step is this new rear view mirror that's going to actually look out the back of the car. So the paradigm is you look in the rear view mirror, but you'll never see, you could have the car stacked up with popcorn and boxes and it'll still show you out the back of the car. You could have tall people sitting in the back seat. It's still going to look out the back of the car perfectly as if, giving you perfect vision out the back of the car. I
They
want the
better.
same thing when I
Mhm.
look to the left. I would like
Yeah.
I would like to have unfettered video view out of the car.
Yeah, I agree with that. They would have a problem in that the cameras would have to have a little bitty windshield wiper on them because I've noticed that my rear camera tended to get coated with salt this winter, and well, I would just get out and wipe it off with my finger. But
Now,
nevertheless,
now, if you feel like you need to, you can bring your car down here during the winter, and I'll look after it. And
no, thank you.
while you're having your snow,
No,
we can keep it here in the Texas sunshine.
between my traction control and my beautiful 6-speed transmission and
Yes,
my throttle by wire and all these good things, I'm perfectly
gadgets.
happy with my car in the snow.
Perfect. We have run right on past our 30-minute time limit, so
Oh
I'm gonna
shucks.
pull us to a
Okay.
close. We do
Okay.
these kind of like conversations on Thursday nights. Sometimes we have 2 or 3 or 4 people, and if you want to participate in the future, the way you do that is circle me on Google Plus, contact me on the forums, comment in the. What we do is we put a thread every week in the forums as well. If you're watching this from our friend Vinny's Cadillac Country Club, Vinny, we're sorry we missed you tonight,
Yeah.
and hello to you guys at Cadillac Country Club. And I hope you are enjoying your Cadillac as much as I'm enjoying my Cadillac, and I bet Jim's enjoying his Cadillac.
Oh, I
That
love the Cadillac.
that one of the things I try and be very clear about is if you think that this is one of those forums where the owner doesn't drive a Cadillac, this is not that kind of forum. This is the kind of forum where we talk about Cadillacs all the time because that's what I enjoy talking about and that's what I enjoy driving. And so we're a two Cadillac family only because I don't have any more room. That's, if I
That's
had
my
more
problem.
places to put Cadillacs, I would be happy to have more Cadillacs.
I'd have one of those XLRs. You know,
Yep.
you found a black XLR V for what 35K a couple of months ago.
Yep.
Oh, I would have had that the next morning if I had room for it.
Yep, I think an XLR would be an excellent weekend car. Although after the ice and so on in Texas a few days, I am a big fan of having my car in the garage and not having a separate weekend car that I'm thinking. And if I've got to save up more money for an ATSB, a used ATSB in 2 years, then I got to watch my pennies. Okay, thank you so much, Jim, for being on. I absolutely avoid doing these as monologues, and so I appreciate the heck out of you being on, and I always enjoy visiting with you.
I've done a monologue and I don't like it either.
Yeah, yeah. And the last thing I would want is that anyone else would like it, because then they would encourage me to continue doing that. Hold on, I'm going to hit stop broadcast, and hold on just a minute, we'll cover some admin. Again, if you want to be on at home, contact me, and we'll teach you what kind of camera you need, what kind of headphones you need. I use lights. The guys don't use specialized lights. I use them because otherwise my TV monitor reflects off my glasses and so
I
on. But you
spent
don't have
three
to.
dollars on my
It's
lighting
cheap
system.
setup. And if you're really dying to participate and you can't afford any of this stuff, talk to me that we have scholarship programs available. So, thanks.